In a cramped, poorly heated room that smells of damp concrete and stale city air, a young woman in her early 20s, her eyes shadowed with deep weariness, yet holding a spark of defiance, stands protectively before a small boy. He huddles on a worn sofa, his own eyes wide with a fear that mirrors hers. Opposite them, a man in an impeccably tailored dark suit fills the space, his smile thin and reptilian, his gaze like chips of ice. His smooth, devoid of warmth voice delivers an ultimatum, a monstrous proposition hanging in the flickering dim light, an unthinkable sacrifice in exchange for survival. Will she barter her future to a faceless stranger to shield the child from the unforgiving streets? What choice does she truly have when every option seems to lead to ruin? Like the video and subscribe to the channel to catch more thrilling, emotional stories. Hit the bell and join our journey. The biting November wind whipped around Ilara Vance, tugging at the thin fabric of her coat as if trying to steal the last vestiges of warmth from her body. It was a wind that smelled of rain and the metallic tang of the sprawling city, a scent that had become synonymous with her struggles. 24 years old, Ilara felt the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. The city lights hummed, a constant, indifferent chorus to her quiet desperation. She stood before the flickering fluorescent lights of her apartment building's hallway, the chipped paint and graffitied walls, a stark reflection of her circumstances. Inside, in their cramped, poorly heated two-room apartment, her younger brother Leo would be waiting, his small face lightly pressed against the cold window, watching for her. Leo, with his bright, hopeful eyes, was the reason she kept fighting. Their parents' deaths 2 years prior had been a cruel, swift blow, leaving Ilara not only heartbroken, but also solely responsible for 10-year-old Leo and a mountain of debt she hadn't known existed. She worked 2 jobs, a barista by day, a cleaner by night. But it was like trying to fill a sieve with water. The city, with its glittering skyscrapers and endless opportunities, felt like a fortress designed to keep people like her out. Tonight, the chill in their apartment was more profound than usual, a premonition of the frost that was settling deep in her soul. Eviction notices had become regular, unwelcome guests, each one a paper harbinger of doom. As she climbed the creaking stairs, the smell of damp concrete and stale cooking oil assailed her. Her key fumbled in the lock, her fingers numb. The apartment was dim. Leo huddled on the worn sofa under a thick blanket, a textbook open on his lap, though his gaze was distant. "You're late," he said, his voice small, laced with an unspoken fear that mirrored her own. Ilara forced a smile. "Traffic was awful. Have you eaten?" He nodded, pointing to a half-eaten sandwich on a plate. "Mrs. Henderson from next door brought it." Gratitude warred with shame. She should be the one providing. A sharp, authoritative knock on the door shattered the fragile quiet. Leo jumped, his eyes wide. Ilara's heart plummeted. She knew that knock. It wasn't Mrs. Henderson. She opened the door to Mr. Silas Blackwood, a man whose impeccably tailored suits and polished shoes seemed an affront in their decaying hallway. His smile was thin, reptilian, his eyes cold chips of ice. He represented the monolithic entity that held their parents' debt, an entity that had remained faceless until he began his personal visits. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of warmth. "May I come in? We have matters of some urgency to discuss." He didn't wait for an answer, stepping past her into the small room, his presence seeming to suck the air out. Leo instinctively shrank further into the sofa. Blackwood surveyed the room with a disdainful air. "Charming. As always." He then fixed his gaze on Ilara. "The time for pleasantries and indeed for extensions is over. The total outstanding amount with accrued interest is, shall we say, insurmountable for someone of your means." Ilara stood her ground, though her hands were trembling. "I'm doing everything I can. I just need more time." "Time," Blackwood mused, tapping a manicured finger against his lips, "is a luxury you no longer possess. Your options are stark. Eviction by the end of the week, your brother placed into the state's care, and your wages garnished for the foreseeable future, not that they would make a dent." Tears pricked Ilara's eyes, but she fought them back. She would not break in front of this man or in front of Leo. There has to be another way. Blackwood's smile widened, but it held no kindness. As it happens, a unique proposition has arisen. An alternative. One that would see your entire debt eradicated. Instantly. Ilara stared at him, suspicion coiling in her stomach. What kind of proposition? A benefactor, a rather wealthy and reclusive gentleman, has taken an interest in your situation. He is prepared to settle your family's debt in its entirety. Blackwood paused for dramatic effect. In exchange for your hand in marriage. The words hung in the air, so absurd, so monstrous, that Ilara almost laughed. Marriage? You can't be serious. Oh, I am perfectly serious, Miss Vance. He is a man of considerable influence, a millionaire many times over. He desires a wife, and for reasons of his own, he has selected you. Or rather, your predicament has made you a suitable candidate. Ilara felt a wave of nausea. To be sold, like property, to clear a debt. I don't even know this man. Who is he? His name is Mr. Damien Valerius, a pillar of society, though he prefers to remain out of the public eye. You will find him accommodating, I'm sure. Consider it, Miss Vance. A life of comfort, security for your brother, all debts cleared. Or, his gaze flickered towards Leo, the alternative. Despair, cold and suffocating, washed over Ilara. She looked at Leo, at his pale, anxious face, and the fight drained out of her. His future, his safety was paramount. What choice did she truly have? Ruin and homelessness, or a gilded cage? And if I refuse? She whispered, though she already knew the answer. Then, as I said, the alternative. The eviction proceeds. Your brother. He let the threat hang. Ilara closed her eyes, the hum of the city lights outside a mocking reminder of the world that was about to swallow them whole, a world where a poor young woman was a commodity. She pictured Leo, alone, frightened. The image was unbearable. She took a shaky breath, the scent of rain now seeming to carry the weight of her unshed tears. When would I meet him? Blackwood's smile was triumphant. Arrangements will be made. You've made a wise decision, Miss Vance. A very wise decision indeed. He produced a sleek, expensive-looking card. My associate will contact you tomorrow with the details. Expect to be collected. He turned and left, the click of his polished shoes on the worn linoleum echoing his victory. Ilara sank onto the edge of the sofa, pulling Leo into a fierce hug. He clung to her, sensing the shift, the monumental, terrifying decision that had just been made. It's okay, Leo, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Everything will be okay, I promise. But as she stared into the dim, flickering light of their small apartment, a desperate, suffocating helplessness threatened to consume her. She was a pawn, her life no longer her own, bartered away to a faceless millionaire. A flicker of defiance remained, a tiny ember in the ashes of her hope, but it was overshadowed by the crushing weight of her sacrifice. The engagement was a chains, and she had just willingly or unwillingly fastened them around her own wrists, all for Leo. For a moment, a single tear escaped and traced a cold path down her cheek, a testament to the choice she had been forced to make. The following days were a blur of numb compliance and silent fear. An unmarked black car, sleek and imposing, arrived as promised. A stoic driver who offered no name and even less conversation transported Ilara and a bewildered Leo away from the grimy familiarity of their neighborhood. Ilara clutched Leo's hand, her own small suitcase containing all their worldly possessions resting at her feet. She had said a brief, strained goodbye to Mrs. Henderson, who had looked at her with worried eyes but asked no questions Ilara wasn't prepared to answer. They drove for what felt like hours, leaving the congested heart of the city behind, moving towards an older, more secluded district where grand stone houses stood like silent sentinels behind iron gates and ancient trees. The air here was cleaner, tinged with the scent of damp earth and old money. Finally, the car turned into a long, winding driveway, flanked by towering oaks whose branches intertwined overhead, creating a tunnel of shadows even in the midday light. At the end of an immaculately kept gravel path loomed a mansion. It was less a house and more a Gothic masterpiece, all dark stone turrets and sprawling wings, with ivy clinging to its walls like a living shroud. It was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, a place ripped from the pages of a brooding romance novel, yet utterly real. The hum of the distant city was replaced here by the rustle of leaves and an unnerving silence. The car door was opened by another stern-faced man, older this time, with silver hair and an impeccably tailored suit that spoke of decades of discreet service. He introduced himself in a low, cultured voice as Alistair, Mr. Valerius's butler. His eyes, a faded blue, held a flicker of something Ilara couldn't quite decipher. Pity, perhaps, or just weary resignation. "Welcome to Valerius' house, Miss Vance, Master Leo," Alistair said, his tone neutral. "Mr. Valerius is expecting you." Ilara and Leo were led into a cavernous hallway, the floors polished marble that reflected the dim light filtering through stained glass windows high above. The air was cool, carrying the faint blended scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else. Something indefinably ancient and alluring, like dried roses and old parchment. Suits of armor stood guard in shadowy alcoves, and vast tapestries depicting forgotten battles adorned the walls. It was a world away from their cramped apartment, opulent and overwhelming. Damien Valerius was waiting for them in a vast library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books. The scent of leather bindings and aged paper, a comforting counterpoint to the house's intimidating grandeur. A fire crackled in a huge stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room and glinting off the crystal glasses on a nearby mahogany table. He rose as they entered. Damien Valerius was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark, modern suit that somehow managed to look timeless. His hair was the color of midnight, and his features were strikingly handsome, though etched with a subtle weariness that his apparent youth, he looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, couldn't quite conceal. But it was his eyes that held Ilara captive. They were a deep, piercing grey, heavy with the secrets of centuries, she thought, yet capable of a surprising, almost unnerving intensity. There was a profound stillness about him, an air of melancholic authority that commanded attention without a single word. "Miss Vance." "Leo," he said, his voice a low baritone, smooth and resonant. It held no discernible warmth, but no overt cruelty either. "Welcome. Alistair will show you to your rooms. I trust your journey was acceptable." Ilara found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "It was fine, thank you." She felt Leo press closer to her side. Damien's gaze flickered to Leo, and for a fleeting moment, something softened in his expression. "Alistair has arranged for a tutor for Leo, and anything else he might require. His education and well-being will be seen to." He then turned his attention back to Ilara. "We will speak later, Miss Vance, about the arrangements." The unspoken word engagement hung heavy between them. Ilara merely nodded, her throat tight. She felt like an exhibit, brought here for inspection. Alistair led them up a sweeping, creaking staircase to a wing of the house that seemed slightly less imposing, though still grand beyond anything Ilara had ever imagined. Leo was given a large, airy room filled with books and toys that looked brand new, a window overlooking a sprawling, manicured garden. His initial fear seemed to momentarily give way to a child's curiosity. Ilara's room was adjacent, a spacious chamber with a four-poster bed, antique furniture, and its own fireplace. A small adjoining room had been set up as an artist's studio, complete with an easel, canvases, and a range of paints and charcoals far superior to any she had ever owned. She touched a tube of expensive oil paint, a pang of something akin to longing, quickly suppressed, stirring within her. It felt like a gilded cage, every comfort provided, yet freedom was a distant memory. In the following days, Ilara struggled to adjust. The silence of the vast house was unnerving, after the constant cacophony of her old life. She saw Damien infrequently. He kept to his own wing, often working late into the night in his study, a place Alistair subtly indicated was off-limits. Their interactions were formal, stilted. He was polite, almost distant, his sophistication an invisible barrier. He asked after Leo, inquired if she needed anything, but his eyes remained guarded, revealing little of the man behind the millionaire facade. Ilara's primary concern was Leo. To her relief, he began to tentatively thrive. The tutor was kind and patient, and the sprawling gardens offered endless exploration. He even began to speak of Alistair with a shy affection. Damien, when he did encounter Leo, was surprisingly gentle, answering the boy's hesitant questions with a grave politeness that Leo seemed to accept. One afternoon, Ilara saw Damien in the garden, showing Leo a rare bird perched in an ancient oak, his usually stern face softened by a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a glimpse beneath the surface, but too fleeting to grasp. Alistair was a constant, quiet presence. He managed the household with an effortless efficiency, his loyalty to Damien absolute. Yet Ilara sensed a guarded sympathy in his occasional glances. One evening, as he brought her a tray with tea, he paused at the door. "Mr. Valerius, he has his own burdens, Miss Vance," Alistair said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This house has seen much sorrow. Be patient." It was the most personal thing he had ever said to her. One rainy afternoon, exploring the less used sections of the library, Ilara found it, an ancient leather-bound diary tucked away on a high shelf. It was locked with a tarnished silver clasp. As her fingers brushed against it, a strange, faint thrum of energy seemed to pulse against her skin, a fleeting sensation that made her snatch her hand back. Curiosity, a dangerous and compelling force, began to bloom. Whose diary was it? And what secrets did it hold? She left it there for now, but the thought of it lingered. The shadow of Mr. Blackwood still loomed. He called once, his voice oily and self-satisfied, to confirm that the initial terms were being met. During the call, Damien had entered the room unexpectedly. He hadn't said a word, but the look he'd given Ilara as she spoke to Blackwood, a flash of something cold and fiercely protective in his grey eyes, had made her abruptly end the conversation. Later, she overheard a low, tense exchange between Damien and Alistair in the main hall. "Blackwood is pushing his luck, Alistair." Damien's voice was a low growl, devoid of its usual cultured calm. "He needs to remember his place, and ensure his associates keep their distance from her." "The old ways are stirring, sir," Alistair replied, his tone grave. "Her presence here, it changes things. We must be vigilant for her safety." Her safety. The words sent a chill down Ilara's spine. What did Alistair mean by the old ways? And why would her safety be a concern beyond the obvious awkwardness of her situation? Despite the undercurrents of mystery, and her own deep-seated mistrust of the forced engagement, small moments began to chip away at Ilara's defenses. Damien, for all his remoteness, was not cruel. He ensured Leo received top-tier medical attention for a lingering cough that had worried Ilara for months, something she could never have afforded. The specialist Damien had summoned diagnosed a mild but persistent bronchial issue, prescribing medication that quickly brought relief to Leo. Damien never mentioned it. The act of kindness performed silently, almost invisibly. This was the mysterious gift she had vaguely hoped for, made real. One evening, unable to sleep, Ilara was sketching in a small notebook she'd kept, her charcoal moving swiftly across the page, trying to capture the way the moonlight fell across the ancient rose bushes outside her window. She hadn't realized Damien had entered her sitting room until he spoke, his voice soft. "You have a talent, Miss Vance." Startled, she looked up. He was standing by the doorway, observing her. For once, the guardedness in his eyes seemed less pronounced. He gestured to the professional art supplies in the adjoining studio. "Those are for you. Please make use of them." "Thank you," she managed, surprised by the unexpected acknowledgement. It's just something I do, to pass the time." "Art is more than passing time," he said, a hint of wistfulness in his tone. "It can be a refuge, a way to see the world or to escape it." He didn't elaborate, but the words resonated with her. Their shared love for a niche, almost forgotten Victorian poet, discovered accidentally when Ilara commented on a volume left open in the library, led to their first truly unguarded conversation. They spoke for over an hour, about the melancholic beauty of the verses, about the nature of loss and endurance themes the poet explored with heartbreaking clarity. For that brief time, he wasn't the imposing millionaire and she wasn't the reluctant fiancé. They were simply two people finding common ground in the pages of a book. The city, however, wasn't entirely left behind. One afternoon, Alistair drove Ilara into a quieter, older part of town so she could pick up a few personal items she'd requested, specific art pencils not available online. While Alistair waited in the car, Ilara browsed the small, charming art shop. As she stepped back onto the cobblestone street, two rough-looking men suddenly blocked her path. They weren't physically threatening, but their leering grins and insinuating comments made her skin crawl. "Well, well, what have we here? Lost little bird?" one of them sneered, stepping closer. Before Ilara could react, a blur of motion erupted from the parked car. Damien, who she hadn't even realized was with Alistair, was suddenly there. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a sound, but the way he moved, the sheer intensity that emanated from him was terrifying. He simply placed himself between Ilara and the men, his eyes like chips of glacial ice. The men, after one look at his face, stumbled backward, muttering apologies, and practically fled. Damien turned to her, his expression unreadable, but for the fierce, protective blaze in his eyes. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, controlled, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Yes," Ilara whispered, shaken. "Thank you." He merely nodded, his composure returning as quickly as it had fractured. "Alistair, let's return." The incident left Ilara deeply unsettled, not by the men, but by Damien's reaction. It was more than just polite concern, it was primal, possessive, and it made her realize with a jolt that whatever his reasons for this strange engagement, he considered her his to protect. A few nights later, Ilara found a small velvet box on her pillow. Inside, nestled on satin, was an antique silver locket, intricately carved with a motif of twining roses and thorns. It was beautiful and strangely familiar, though she couldn't place why. There was no note. When she hesitantly asked Damien about it the next morning, he simply said, "It belonged to someone a long time ago. I thought you might appreciate its craftsmanship." His gaze was distant, as if looking into a past she couldn't fathom. She felt an inexplicable connection to the locket, a faint warmth against her skin when she wore it, a sense of history and sorrow intertwined. The true origin of her family's debt, the one that had ensnared her, began to unravel through a series of unsettling discoveries. While searching for an old atlas in Damien's study one afternoon, she stumbled upon a ledger. It wasn't a financial ledger of his vast businesses, but something older, more personal. Her father's name was in it, linked to a series of transactions and a final damning entry next to Damien's own ancestral family name, Valerius, dating back almost 25 years, around the time of her birth. The entries were cryptic, referencing covenants, blood obligations, and the old accords. Her father hadn't just accrued a simple monetary debt. He had, it seemed, entered into some kind of profound, almost feudal pact with Damien's family, a pact that had now fallen to her to fulfill. Mr. Blackwood wasn't just a ruthless debt collector. He was an enforcer of these ancient, shadowy agreements. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just about money. It was about lineage, about promises made in shadows generations ago. Damien hadn't chosen her at random, nor had Blackwood. She was bound to this fate by more than just her parents' financial ruin. That evening she confronted Damien. She found him standing by the tall windows of the library, gazing out at the moonlit garden, a glass of dark liquid in his hand. "My father," Ilara began, her voice trembling slightly, the old ledger clutched in her hand. "His debt to your family. It wasn't just money, was it?" Damien turned slowly, his face unreadable in the dim light. He didn't feign surprise. "No, Ilara, it was not." "What was it then? What are these covenants, these blood obligations?" He gestured to a chair. "Sit, this is a longer story than you might imagine." As the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows, Damien began to speak. He didn't reveal everything, not yet, but he spoke of old alliances between certain ancient families, human and otherwise, families that possessed unique knowledge, or guarded secrets, or held lines of power that stretched back into the mists of time. Her father, a historian with a fascination for the occult and forgotten lore, had apparently sought out the Valerius family, offering his research, his loyalty, in exchange for protection and resources during a desperate time in his own youth. He pledged his lineage into service, should the need arise, Damien explained, his voice low and devoid of judgment. A promise of aid, of alliance. It was a dangerous world he dabbled in, Ilara, and the Valerius name offered a shield. "And I am the need that arose?" Ilara asked, bitterness lacing her tone. "A convenient daughter to settle an ancient IOU." Damien looked at her then, and for the first time she saw a flicker of genuine pain in his eyes, a deep, abiding sorrow. "It is more complex than that. Blackwood, he deals in the letter of these old laws, not their spirit. When your parents died and your family's vulnerability became apparent, he saw an opportunity to enforce the covenant in its harshest, most literal interpretation, to deliver you to me, bound by an unbreakable contract. And you simply accepted?" "My choices were limited," he said, his gaze turning back to the dark garden. "To refuse Blackwood would have exposed you to far worse. There are others, entities, who would have gladly claimed the forfeiture of your father's pledge. Blackwood, for all his avarice, is at least a known quantity." He paused. "And perhaps," he added, so quietly she almost didn't hear him, "I saw something in the reports about you, about your resilience, your quiet strength in the face of such hardship, something that resonated." The confession, veiled as it was, hung in the air. He wasn't just a cold captor. He was a player in a much larger, older game, one whose rules she was only just beginning to comprehend. And he had, in his own enigmatic way, tried to shield her from its crueler aspects. The fragile truce born of this revelation was shattered a week later. Ilara had taken Leo to a small private park near the estate, a place Alistair had assured her was secure. They were feeding ducks by a pond, Leo's laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air, a rare moment of normalcy. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The cheerful sounds of the park seemed to dim, replaced by an unnerving silence. A cold mist, unnatural for the bright afternoon, swirled around them. From the shadows of the ancient trees, figures emerged. They moved with a fluid grace that was inhuman, their eyes glowing with a faint, predatory light. Ilara recognized the aura instantly. It was the same chilling presence she'd felt from Damien, but darker, more overtly menacing. Vampires. Before Ilara could scream, one of them, a woman with fiery red hair and eyes like burning embers, was before her. Her beauty was startling, predatory. "Ilara Vance," the woman purred, her voice like silk and steel. "Damien's little human project. How quaint." Ilara instinctively pushed Leo behind her. "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "I'm Serafina, and I want what is mine. Damien has been distracted. It's time he remembered his allegiances. And you, my dear, are the perfect leverage." Two other vampires flanked Serafina, their expressions hungry. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Ilara. This was no mere thuggery. This was a direct supernatural threat. Just as Serafina reached out a pale, elegant hand towards Leo, a dark shape descended from the sky with impossible speed. Damien landed between them and Serafina's group, a low snarl ripping from his throat, his eyes blazing with a terrifying, incandescent light. His handsome features were transformed, sharpened into a predatory mask, fangs subtly elongating. This was not the reserved, melancholic millionaire. This was something ancient, powerful and utterly lethal. "Serafina," Damien bit out, his voice a guttural growl. "You dare threaten them?" Serafina's smile was venomous. "Damien, darling, always so dramatic. I merely came to issue an invitation, and to see the creature that has so thoroughly captured your attention." Her eyes flicked to Ilara with contempt. The air crackled with unseen energy. The other two vampires tensed, but Serafina held up a hand. "Not here, Damien, not now, but this isn't over. You cannot hide from your own kind forever. And she," Serafina's gaze fixed on Ilara with chilling intensity, "will be the key to your return, or your destruction." With another swirl of mist they were gone, as silently and suddenly as they had appeared. Damien whirled around, his transformed features slowly receding, though his eyes still burned with a dangerous light. He knelt, his hands gently gripping Ilara's arms. "Are you hurt? Is Leo all right?" Ilara was shaking, clutching a terrified, silent Leo. We're okay. Who was that? What did she mean?" Damien's face was grim, the earlier vulnerability replaced by a hard, protective resolve. "Serafina is an old problem, one I thought long buried." He looked at Ilara, his gaze intense. "You are not safe. Not anymore. Blackwood was a nuisance. She is a genuine threat." That night the house felt different, the shadows deeper, the silence more charged. Damien stayed close, a silent sentinel. The pretense of a mere engagement of convenience was gone, shattered by Serafina's blatant aggression. Later, as Ilara sat by the fire in her room, trying to calm her racing heart, Damien entered. He carried 2 glasses and a decanter of wine. "I owe you an explanation," he said, his voice weary. "A fuller one." He poured them both a drink, the deep red liquid catching the firelight. He then told her about Serafina, an ancient and powerful vampire from his own past, a former ally turned bitter rival, obsessed with power and possessing a twisted, possessive claim on him. He spoke of vampire society, its intricate politics, its dangerous feuds, a world hidden beneath the surface of human existence. "She sees you as a weakness, Ilara," Damien said, his voice laced with a grim understanding. "A tool to control me, or to destroy what little peace I've managed to carve out." Ilara looked at him, at the lines of strain around his eyes, the centuries of loneliness etched into his very being. "And what am I to you, Damien, truly?" He met her gaze, and this time there was no hiding the depth of emotion in his eyes. "When Blackwood brought your name to me, enforcing that archaic pact, I saw it initially as an unwelcome complication. But then I learned more about you, your resilience, your quiet courage, the way you fought to protect your brother against impossible odds. It reminded me of something I thought I had lost long ago. Hope, perhaps." He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. "I am tired, Ilara, tired of the shadows, of the endless, solitary march of immortality. You and Leo, you brought light into this house, a life it hasn't known for centuries." He hesitated, then confessed, "I accepted this arrangement, not just to honor an old debt, or even to protect you from Blackwood's alternatives, but because a part of me, a foolish, reckless part, hoped that perhaps you could be more than just a contractual obligation." Ilara's heart ached at his words, at the raw vulnerability he finally allowed himself to show. She reached out, her fingers tentatively covering his hand where it rested on the arm of his chair. His skin was cool, but not unpleasantly so. "Damien," she said softly, "I was terrified when this all began. I felt like a prisoner. But I don't feel that way anymore. Not entirely." She looked into his eyes, seeing not just the vampire, but the man burdened by an eternity of existence. "You've protected Leo. You've shown me kindness, even when you tried to hide it." A fragile understanding passed between them, a bond forged in shared secrets and encroaching danger. The forced engagement had, against all odds, begun to transform into something far more complex, something with the tentative, hesitant promise of genuine connection. But Serafina's shadow loomed large, a promise of a storm yet to come. The safety of Valeria's house was no longer guaranteed, and Ilara knew with a chilling certainty that the fight for their future, whatever it might hold, had only just begun. The days following Serafina's appearance were fraught with a new, palpable tension. Damien rarely left Ilara and Leo's side, his usual reserved demeanor replaced by a vigilant, almost predatory alertness. The vast mansion, once a symbol of Ilara's gilded cage, now felt like a fortress under siege. Alistair, his face etched with worry, moved with even greater quietness, overseeing subtle fortifications Ilara hadn't noticed before. Reinforced shutters, ancient symbols discreetly etched into doorframes. Ilara spent hours with the locked diary she had found. After Serafina's attack, Damien, seeing the determined set of her jaw, had reluctantly provided her with a small antique key he'd kept hidden. "It belonged to my great-grandmother, Annalise," he'd said, his voice heavy. "She was versed in our family's particular burdens. Perhaps you'll find something useful, or at least understand more." The diary, written in a faded, elegant script, was a revelation. Annalise Valerius had been a human woman married into the vampire lineage, a scholar of their lore, their strengths, and their weaknesses. She wrote of vampire society, its factions, its rivalries. She detailed rituals, ancient grievances, and, importantly, she wrote extensively about Serafina. Annalise had known Serafina, had even considered her a dangerous contemporary. The diary described Serafina's vanity, her obsession with Damien's bloodline, and a peculiar aversion to a specific rare hybrid of wolfsbane and silverbell that grew only in certain shadowed mountain valleys. Annalise had cultivated it in secret. Ilara also found sketches of the locket Damien had given her. Annalise had designed it. It wasn't just an ornament. It was a type of protective amulet, its power subtle, tied to the wearer's intent and the strength of their spirit. Ilara clutched it, feeling a connection to this long-dead woman who had navigated a similar, perilous world. One evening, as a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within, Damien found Ilara poring over the diary in the library, a map spread out beside her, tracing possible locations for the rare herbs Annalise described. "You're taking this very seriously," he observed, a hint of surprise in his voice. He had expected her to be frightened, perhaps to demand release from their dangerous situation. Instead, she was researching, strategizing. "Serafina threatened Leo," Ilara said simply, her eyes meeting his. "She threatened you. This is my fight too now. Whether I chose it or not initially, she has made it so." She tapped the diary. Annalise wrote about Serafina's weaknesses, not just sunlight or stakes, specific things. A grudging admiration dawned in Damien's eyes. "You continue to surprise me, Ilara." "Someone has to," she replied, with a small, tired smile. "You can't just brood and look imposing all the time." A genuine, albeit faint, smile touched Damien's lips. "Is that what I do?" "Mostly," she confirmed, and the brief moment of levity eased some of the tension between them. The attack, when it came, was not the subtle infiltration Ilara had perhaps expected. It was a brutal, direct assault. Under the cover of the raging storm, Serafina and a dozen of her most ruthless followers breached the estate's outer defenses. Alarms, both modern and mystical, shrieked through the mansion. Damien was instantly transformed, a whirlwind of controlled fury, moving to intercept the intruders in the grand hall. "Alistair, get Ilara and Leo to the safe room," he roared, his voice echoing with inhuman power as he met the first wave of attackers. Alistair, surprisingly agile for his age, grabbed Ilara's arm. "This way, Miss Vance, quickly!" But as they reached the staircase, two of Serafina's vampires, moving with blinding speed, cut them off. Leo cried out, clinging to Ilara. This was it, the moment she had dreaded yet somehow prepared for. Her mind raced, Annalise's words, her own observations, Damien's veiled confessions, all coalescing. She couldn't fight these creatures physically, not like Damien could. But Annalise hadn't relied on brute strength either. "Leo," Ilara said, her voice surprisingly calm, "do you remember the game we played? The one with the mirrors from my art class?" Leo, terrified, nodded mutely. "Good boy." She pushed him gently towards Alistair. Alistair, the south corridor, the one with the silver-backed mirrors Annalise mentioned in the diary. They amplify light, even moonlight. Get Leo there. Create a diversion. Alistair hesitated for a fraction of a second, then saw the resolve in her eyes. "Understood, miss." He scooped up Leo and darted down a side passage. The two vampires advanced on Ilara, their eyes glinting. "The little human thinks she can play general," one sneered. Ilara backed away slowly towards the main library. "I'm not a general. I'm just observant." She knew Damien was occupied, but she needed to buy him time, to create an opening. Serafina herself had not yet appeared. She was likely waiting for Damien to be weakened, or for the perfect moment to seize her prize. As the vampires entered the library, Ilara, recalling another detail from Annalise's diary about Serafina's coven, having a particular disdain for concentrated human artistry, for symbols of enduring human spirit, did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a heavy, ornate inkwell from Damien's desk and hurled it at a massive, ancient, illuminated manuscript displayed under glass, one Damien treasured. The glass shattered with a satisfying crash, ink splashing across the priceless parchment. The vampires recoiled, hissing. "Sacrilege! The master will be furious," one cried, momentarily distracted by the destruction of such a revered artifact of human creation, exactly as Annalise had described their particular brand of aesthetic snobbery. It was the opening she needed. She darted towards a heavy velvet curtain Annalise had noted, concealed a small disused service passage leading towards the older, more fortified east wing. As she reached it, Serafina appeared in the main doorway of the library, her expression one of cold fury. "You meddlesome little whelp!" Serafina hissed, her eyes blazing. "Did you really think you could outwit me?" "I'm not trying to outwit you," Ilara said, her hand on the curtain. "I'm just trying to protect what's mine." The words surprised even herself. When had Damien and this strange, dangerous life become hers? Serafina laughed, a chilling sound. "Damien is mine. He always has been. You are merely an inconvenient distraction, one I will now remove." She lunged faster than Ilara could have imagined, but Ilara had been counting on her arrogance. Just as Serafina reached her, Ilara pulled back the heavy curtain, not revealing a passage, but a tall silver-framed mirror she and Alistair had painstakingly positioned earlier that day, based on Annalise's notes about light convergence points in the old house. The storm outside momentarily intensified, and a brilliant fork of lightning illuminated the grounds, its reflection catching the mirror and exploding in a blinding flash directly into Serafina's face. The vampire queen shrieked, shielding her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected intensity of the reflected natural light, combined with the silver's inherent properties against her kind. It wasn't enough to destroy her, but it was enough. In that instant, Damien, having dispatched the vampires in the hall, was there. He moved like a wraith, tackling Serafina with brutal force, the two of them crashing through a set of antique doors into the storm-lashed courtyard beyond. Ilara didn't hesitate. She knew Damien could handle Serafina in a direct confrontation, but Annalise's diary had mentioned the specific Wolfsbane Silverbell hybrid. She'd found a small withered sprig pressed between the pages, and Alistair, recognizing it, had confessed to cultivating a tiny hidden patch in a secluded part of the greenhouse, a secret kept for generations, just in case. He'd given her several carefully wrapped bundles. She raced out into the courtyard. The rain was a torrential downpour, lightning splitting the sky. Damien and Serafina were locked in a furious battle, their movements blurs of shadow and violence. Serafina, recovering from the flash, was pressing Damien hard, her ancient power a formidable match for his. Ilara saw her chance. Serafina, in her rage, was focused solely on Damien. Ilara circled them, unnoticed in the chaos, her heart pounding. She unwrapped one of the bundles, the pungent metallic scent of the herbs sharp in the rain-soaked air. "Serafina!" Ilara screamed, her voice nearly lost in the thunder. When the vampire queen momentarily turned, her eyes blazing with contempt, Ilara threw the bundle of herbs with all her might. It struck Serafina square in the face. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Serafina screamed, a raw, agonized sound, smoke rising from her skin where the herbs made contact. Her beautiful face contorted in pain, her power visibly faltering. "What is this witchcraft?" she shrieked, stumbling back, her eyes wide with disbelief and agony. Damien didn't waste the opportunity. He lunged, not with fangs or claws, but with a heavy, silver-banded ceremonial dagger he'd snatched from a wall display inside, another of Annalise's carefully placed contingencies Ilara had pointed out. He drove it deep into Serafina's shoulder, not a killing blow, but one that would cripple and bind. Serafina let out a final piercing cry of rage and pain. "This isn't over, Damien. You will pay for this, both of you." Then, with a furious swirl of shadow and wind, she and her remaining followers vanished into the storm, retreating. Silence descended, broken only by the drumming rain and their ragged breaths. Damien stood, swaying slightly, the dagger still in his hand, his eyes fixed on the spot where Serafina had disappeared. He was bleeding from several wounds, his clothes torn. Ilara rushed to his side. "Damien, are you all right?" He turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. The predatory fury was gone, replaced by an overwhelming mix of relief, exhaustion, and something else. Something raw and deeply emotional. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice hoarse. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking away a raindrop that might have been a tear. You saved us." "We saved each other," she whispered, her gaze unwavering. In the heart of the storm, surrounded by the remnants of battle, something profound shifted between them. The terror of the night, her active role in their survival, his vulnerability, it had stripped away the last vestiges of pretense. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her tightly against him as if afraid she too might vanish into the storm. "I thought I would lose you," he confessed, his voice muffled in her hair. The thought, it was unbearable. "I'm not going anywhere," Ilara said, her arms wrapping around him, holding on just as tightly. "Not unless you want me to." "Want you to?" He pulled back slightly, his storm-grey eyes, now clear and luminous, searching hers. "Ilara, after tonight, after everything, I don't just want you to stay. I need you to. This engagement, it started as a contract, a means to an end. But it has become so much more." He hesitated, the words seeming to catch in his throat. I care for you, Ilara Vance, more than I thought myself capable of caring for anyone again." Tears welled in Ilara's eyes, mingling with the rain. "Oh, Damien," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I care for you too." It was a confession born in chaos, sealed by shared sacrifice. As the storm began to subside, the first hint of dawn painting the eastern sky a bruised purple, they stood amidst the wreckage, no longer captive and captor, but two souls bound by an unlikely love, forged in adversity and tempered in the heat of battle. The fight was over for now, and in its aftermath a new, fragile hope began to bloom. The dawn broke clear and cold, washing the grime and terror of the night from Valeria's house. Servants, led by a weary but resolute Alistair, moved silently, clearing debris, mending what could be mended. Leo, pale but safe, emerged from the secure room, rushing into Ilara's arms, his small body trembling. Damien, his wounds now tended to by a surprisingly gentle Alistair, watched them, a quiet understanding in his eyes. The immediate threat of Serafina was gone, though Damien warned she was too old and too vengeful to be truly defeated, merely thwarted for now. "She will lick her wounds," he said, his voice still raspy, "and she will plot. But she knows now that you are not a pawn, Ilara. You are a queen in your own right." Ilara blushed at his words, but felt a quiet strength settle within her. She had faced down a monster, not with supernatural power, but with courage, intelligence, and the wisdom of a woman who had come before her. Annalise's diary, and the locket that now felt like a permanent part of her, were testaments to the enduring power of the human spirit, even in a world of shadows. In the days that followed, a new rhythm established itself in the house. The oppressive formality that had once defined Ilara and Damien's interactions dissolved, replaced by an easy companionship, punctuated by moments of profound tenderness. The engagement, once a symbol of her captivity, was now a word they barely used. What was growing between them needed no such label. It was a bond woven from shared danger, mutual respect, and a love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of soils. Mr. Blackwood, when he next attempted to contact Damien regarding the terms of the arrangement, found himself stonewalled. Damien, with a newfound resolve that Ilara recognized as partly her influence, dealt with him swiftly and decisively. The old covenant, twisted by Blackwood for his own gain, was declared null and void by Damien, who invoked older, more powerful clauses within his family's arcane laws, clauses that spoke of protection and alliance, not servitude. The original debt, the one that had crippled Ilara's family, was settled through Damien's legitimate modern resources, freeing Ilara from its shadow completely and unequivocally. Blackwood, stripped of his leverage and facing the full, icy displeasure of a Valerius, vanished from their lives as thoroughly as Seraphina's retreating mist. Leo, no longer burdened by the unspoken anxieties of their previous life, thrived. He adored Damien, who patiently taught him chess and shared stories of history that were far more fascinating than any textbook. He spent hours in the garden, sketching alongside Ilara, his laughter once again a bright, frequent sound within the ancient walls of Valerius' house. Ilara found her purpose, not just as Damien's partner, but in her own right. She delved deeper into Annalise's journals, learning more about the hidden world Damien inhabited, not with fear, but with a scholar's curiosity and a protector's vigilance. Her art flourished, no longer a mere pastime, but a vibrant expression of her experiences. Her canvases filled with the dramatic interplay of light and shadow, the resilience of nature, and the complex beauty she found in Damien and their shared life. One crisp morning, weeks later, Ilara and Damien stood on the wide stone balcony overlooking the gardens. The autumn leaves were a riot of gold and crimson, and the air was fresh, carrying the scent of wood smoke and distant rain. The city hummed on the horizon, a reminder of the world beyond their sanctuary, but no longer a threat. "Are you happy, Ilara?" Damien asked, his voice soft, his arm resting gently around her shoulders. She leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his ancient heart, a rhythm that had become as familiar and comforting as her own. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "I am. It's not the life I ever imagined for myself, but it's real. We're real." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "This all started because I was forced into an engagement to save my family. I thought I was losing everything. Instead, I found everything." He smiled, a genuine, unrestrained smile that transformed his face, chasing away the last vestiges of his centuries-old sorrow. "And I, who had resigned myself to an eternity of solitude, found a reason to truly live again. You and Leo, you are my redemption, Ilara, my second chance." He tilted her chin up, his gaze full of a love that was both ancient and startlingly new. He kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of promises kept and a future shared. As they stood there, wrapped in a quiet embrace, the sun climbed higher, bathing the old stone of Valerius' house in a warm, golden light. It was the light of a new day, a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of hope, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unexpected, miraculous ways love can find you, even in the darkest of times. The path ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, for Seraphina's threat lingered, and their worlds were still vastly different. But looking at the man beside her, his hand holding hers not as a captor but as an equal, his eyes full of unwavering devotion, Ilara knew they would face it together. Their unlikely connection, born of adversity, had blossomed into an enduring bond, a quiet promise whispered on the morning air, a shared future filled with hope. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe, hit the like button, and comment what you thought. Pick a link on the screen for more stories.